Today I am doing rear brake service on this 2014 Mercedes-Benz E350 4Matic. This is a W212 W212 chassis vehicle. This vehicle has been on the channel before, and there will be future videos on this vehicle as we do various maintenance projects, repair, etc. I'm going to do a full rotor replacement, pads. We'll do the sensor on this side. And this does not have the electronic parking brake. This generation of vehicle doesn't have that. That came into existence in the W213 chassis. We won't have to deal with any electronic parking brake craziness. On that W213, you actually put it in service mode and it backs off the electronic parking brake for you. It can be a hassle depending on the vehicle you're doing it on. I have an entire kit of adapters for removal of electronic parking brakes, but no such issue here. This is a really dirty vehicle. It is unfortunately one that is parked on the street most of the time. It's not garaged, and it is my oldest son's vehicle. It doesn't get a lot of love, but I'm trying to give it some attention today. We'll get started straight away. If you are a first-time viewer of this channel, I do a lot of automotive mechanical videos. Most of them are focused on BMW and Mercedes-Benz. In the Mercedes-Benz camp specifically, I work on W210, W211, W212, and W213 chassis vehicles, which are all E-classes. Occasionally there's a C-class thrown into the mix, but I tend to focus on the E-class. If you're looking for content or you are looking for something that hasn't been done, reach out to me. My mode of operation is if something is relevant and it's worth posting, I'll go to the trouble to video that particular project, to do all the post work, the editing, and get that published. Moving on now, I have disconnected the rear wear sensor. We'll get that the rest of the way out when we take the caliper apart. I have removed the tension clips on both sides. These are super easy. I see people fighting with these all the time. You know, it mounts in this orientation, and really, you just take a screwdriver, you press on the center of it, and it pulls straight out. It's so easy, but I see people fighting with these all the time. I've also removed the retaining bolt. Now, all of this hardware is going to be replaced. The bolts, the sensor, the pads, the rotor, etc. I ordered parts for this project over 6 months ago. So they've been sitting in a box with a lot of other boxes for other projects, and that's usually the way I roll. I think I ordered replacement tension clips. I'm not sure. If not, I'll get those at another time. Yeah, it's been a while since I ordered parts for this project. We'll see what's in the box and we'll take the next step. Let's take a quick look at the parts that were ordered for this project over 6 months ago. First up are the factory brake pads. These are factory pieces. The part number is visible there. At least I thought it was visible. Okay, that's a little bit clearer on that one. But nevertheless, those are factory pads. We have the wear sensor here, replacement wear sensor. We have the replacement retaining bolts for each of the rotors. I don't know why I purchased 3 of these, but I did. It only requires 2 when I need sides. And then we have the rotors themselves. Now, I am disappointed in myself in that I forgot to purchase replacement tension clips, but I will get those replaced when I get this vehicle back at a later time, and we will move ahead. Let's take a quick status update on where we are at this juncture. I have removed the brake pads and the brake calipers on each side, but let's back up just a little bit. The rotor is held in place with this retaining bolt. It is a T30 Torx. I remove it first. If you don't remove it first, you'll have a problem later on getting it removed if it is in fact rusted or corroded in place, as this one was. And if you do it last, then you have nothing to lean on. The rotor will rotate as you're trying to back this out. I place a pin here, and that uses this brake caliper bracket as leverage. Yes, it did rotate on me, but I was able to get it out easily. So I take this out first. Next up is the brake clip. You remove that with a screwdriver. Next up is the brake sensor or wear sensor. You can remove that by hand. And then getting to the caliper itself, it's held in place with 2 7mm hex pins, and I'll show those real quickly. Here are the pins themselves. So these are dry. There was no grease on these. I'm going to clean these up, get all of that material off of them. Probably use some steel wool, and then I'll lubricate those before they go back in. So that's the situation there. The brake pads themselves, they're thin, but they're not down to the backing plates. This is probably as far as you really want to go. We are receiving a warning on the instrument panel, so we'll get the new sensor installed, the new pads, and everything should be good. And by the way, on Mercedes-Benz, they do not do a brake reset the way BMW does. It's done automatically when you change out the brakes. So you don't have to put this particular chassis, a vehicle, the W212, in a service mode like you do on the W213. Apparently this takes care of itself. We're going to prove that later in the video. Okay, we now have the rear caliper brackets removed, as well as the rear rotors. So let's take a look at the caliper bracket mounts right here. And here are two 18mm bolts. The one on the bottom is easy access. You'll have no problem getting to this with a wrench or breaker bar, whatever you want. And these are on extremely tight, and they're fine threads. So it does take some effort to break them free. The one on the top, or the ones on the top on each side, are constrained by this space being between the bolt head and the sway bar end link. So what you want to do is really up to you at this point. If you want to disconnect the sway bar end links and get them out of the way, you can do that, or you can do as I have done, which is use a box wrench along with a length of black pipe. So I used that right there with a box wrench, which was enough leverage to break that top bolt free. But you know, again, those are on tight, they're very fine threads, and it will fight you a little bit at the onset. Once you break it free, then it's kind of slow. As far as getting the rotors off, the one on the driver's side was easy. The one on the passenger side, it didn't want to come off due to these parking brake shoes. So what I had to do is I had to reach through with a screwdriver and back off this tensioner. I didn't have to back it off much, but it did have to move a little for this to come off cleanly. That was necessary to get this rotor off. Your experience might vary. Now we have the new rotors to install and to basically begin reassembly. What I will say is I really like this hub. They're not stainless steel, but they're treated in such a way that they don't rust. That's not always the case on a lot of vehicles, so kudos to Mercedes-Benz. They did a good job on this hub material. Okay, at this juncture, the rear rotors and the caliper brackets are back in place. Got the new T30 Torx bolt holding the rotor, and the brackets are back in with the 18mm bolts. Now I did renew the thread locker on those bolts. You can reuse those bolts, that's fine, but the thread locker from the factory is, you know, it's cut away at the threads when you back the bolt out. I have you know, put some Loctite on those. This is my thread locker of choice. Use whatever you like, and make sure that you do that. However, you can reuse the bolts. Just make sure that you do some fresh thread locker. As far as this side, it's the same story. Everything looks good. Now, one of the questions you may be asking is, did the rotors really need renewing? And I've got the old rotors over there. They are going to go along with the pads to metal recycling. Nothing goes in a landfill that ever comes out of this garage. And I usually recycle somewhere between 300 to 500 pounds of brake parts and suspension parts and all those things each year. The real way to tell if those rotors needed replacing was to mic them. I did not do that. However, This vehicle has 131,000 going on 132,000 miles. And while it's possible those rotors would have gone for another cycle, I don't do things that way. I do things in advance, just like ordering parts for this project. I don't want to have to get back in here and renew the rotors before the pads have run their course. And again, unless I mic them, I could not say for sure, but rotors are not that expensive. I'd rather just do this and do it once and get it over with. That's the scoop there. Next up, we'll put the calipers back on. We'll put the new pads in place. We'll have to use an expander on the caliper itself to push the pin or push the plunger back here, this piece, get that back out of the way, and I'll get all this put back together. Everything's going to be lubed. Everything's going to have Loctite where applicable, and we'll take the next step. For many years when doing brake jobs, I have always used anti-squeal compound. Some may say that it is unnecessary due to the Teflon backing that is on most German vehicle brake pads, or they may say this compound or compounds like this simply do not work. My experience has been different. I've never had an issue with brake squeal. I've always used this, I would say, liberally, but not overly. As you can see, I've got just a little bit on the contact points, and I've never had an issue. Now, how you use this is to apply the anti-squeal compound and allow it to dwell or set up. That is, it will begin to harden just a little bit before you put the brake system back together, so before the pads go back into the vehicle. But I've always had good luck with this. While I am using CRC disc brake quiet today, I've used others, and it's almost like a hard compound glue once it sets up, but when it does, it's good to go. What I typically do with caliper pins, and what I did with this job, is to scrub the pins with steel wool. That gets all the contaminants off of the face of the pin. They're nice and smooth. If you find that you have a pin that is in some way grooved or it needs to be replaced, they're very inexpensive. You can buy a set of these and replace the whole lot. But in my case, with 131,000 plus miles on this vehicle, the pins are still in good shape. After they're cleaned up, I take them one at a time. I apply caliper grease, which we have here in this bottle. Use the brand of your choice. And then I apply thread locker to the threads. In this case, it's Permatex Red. Now this is ready to go back in the vehicle. I'll take these one at a time. I'm doing the passenger side first, working over to the driver's side, and we'll get these done. The calipers have been reinstalled on both sides of the vehicle with the new brake pads. Again, I had to reuse the tension clips because I failed to order new ones when preparing for this project. The caliper pins, which are in behind each of these dust caps, they're back in place. I will provide the torque specifications for those on screen. I'm at a place, having done so many brake jobs over the years, that I do them by feel, but I will provide the information on screen, as well as the torque spec for the 18mm bolts that hold the caliper bracket in place. Again, I do those by feel as well. These are ATE brake products made by ATE, so you can probably buy replacements and things like that from ATE directly rather than through Mercedes-Benz. You may save a few dollars in the process. Let's walk over to the passenger side. Now, all of this is reassembled as well. However, what I want to point out is we need to install the brake wear sensor, and it plugs in here and then it goes into the brake pad itself right in this slot. You need to make sure that this is seated properly. If it is not, it will not provide a reading to the computer and you'll have issues. Just make sure that it's plugged in properly, it's seated there, it's plugged into the brake pad, and it's pushed all the way in where I'm not sure if I'll hear a click on this one or it'll have a feeling about it, but on the BMW pads and most other pads, that's the way that works. The wear sensor is now installed. It's plugged in into this connector, and it's also properly seated into the slot that I was showing before. Now, there is a hole where I would call it like a dowel, or the core of the sensor inserts into, And for reference purposes, I'll grab the old one. This is a good depiction of what's going on. So there is a hole in the pad material, and you're going to slide that dowel or that pin into that hole. What has happened with this pad is that the material has gotten so thin that the pin on the sensor is now touching the rotor. Hence the reason that we have a warning message on the instrument panel. That's what's going on, but this is a very good point of reference. Again, here it is with the new one installed into the new pad, and yeah, I think that looks good. It's fully seated, both plugged in and into the pad itself, but that's what's going on with the old one, and that's why we were receiving a warning. This project is effectively complete at this point. I will put the wheels on the vehicle, obviously, and I will take the vehicle on the road and I will bed the brakes. Bedding brakes is something you need to do on these vehicles, whether you're doing front, rear brakes, or all four corners, and there's lots of information online and available on how to do that, but I've got to go out and drive the vehicle for a bit to make that happen. As always, I hope this project has been helpful.